Now, at this point, they could just lie. Never write off the possibility of Jehovah's Witnesses, when really pushed, just flat out lying to your face. It's happened to me. It's happened to me when I've engaged with them in the street. But in a way, again, it doesn't matter whether they lie to you. What matters is what's going on in their head. Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to the Attic. In this video, I'm going to be sharing my recommendations for what to say to Jehovah's Witnesses. Perhaps you have Jehovah's Witnesses call at your home. Perhaps you see them in the street stood by their carts and you feel compelled to enter into a conversation with them. What's the best thing to say? Now, before we really dig into this subject, I think it's important that we address motives. What are your motives in approaching a dialogue with a Jehovah's Witness? Because, quite frankly, this isn't a game. When you're speaking to anybody who is in what you might call a cult, in a high control group, they take their beliefs very seriously. And they're certainly not going to change their beliefs on the spot because of something that you say to them. They're definitely not going to change their mind or be persuaded if you're rude to them. So the suggestions I'm going to give in this video are all, I feel, respectful, and they are non-combative. But it's crucial that anyone who engages in dialogue has a specific objective in mind, and my recommendation would be that you don't go into any conversation with the intention of belittling somebody or being rude or disrespectful, or frankly winning any kind of argument with them, because that's just not how it works when it comes to people with firmly held religious convictions. The best you can hope for, in my opinion, is to sow some seeds. I've actually done a video series talking with Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm going to show you a thumbnail to a compilation that you can watch, kind of a mashup of some snippets from those conversations. But anyone who's familiar with that series will understand that when I engage with Jehovah's Witnesses, and when I have engaged, it's been in the street when they've been stood by their carts. The aim has always been to be respectful, and rather than, again, win any arguments, simply to say something that might just lodge in their mind and that they might revisit later and think, it might get the cogs whirring, and it might eventually at some future point be like a tether to logic and reason that they can kind of grab onto and think, I'm connecting the dots. I'm seeing how perhaps I've got roped into something that isn't good for me. So with that in mind, I'll go into my suggestions. I have 7 recommendations here. Maybe I'll offer in future videos more recommendations. It's also perhaps worth noting from the outset that if your objective is simply to get Jehovah's Witnesses to stop calling on you, there's a very simple way you can do that, and that's to request to be put on the do not call list. So if Jehovah's Witnesses call at your property, rather than be rude, if you want to get rid of them, rather than be rude and obnoxious and mean to them, all you need to say is, I would like to go on your do not call list. And they will make a note of your address, and they will do their very best to avoid calling on you again in the future. And if they do occasionally slip up and call at your address because they haven't, it's slipped their mind, you can just politely remind them. But that aside, if you are interested in engaging in a meaningful dialogue with Jehovah's Witnesses, here are some suggestions. So my first suggestion, let's say you're speaking to a Jehovah's Witness. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, I'm a Catholic. It doesn't have to be Catholic. You could say, let's say, hypothetically speaking, I am insert religion. Do you think it would be proper for me to question my beliefs? So you say that to a Jehovah's Witness. Let's say I'm Catholic. Do you think it would be proper for me to question my beliefs? They're going to say yes. Or let's hope they say yes. And then drill down and say, why do you say that? Why do you think it would be proper for me to question my beliefs? And you can say, in addition to questioning beliefs, should I research them and subject them to scrutiny? Again, let's assume that they're doing their jobs and they say, yes, you should definitely subject your beliefs to scrutiny. Would it be a good idea to research the history of my church? You know, without wanting to upset any Catholics who are watching, there are some skeletons in the closet. I think we can all agree when it comes to the history of the Vatican and all that kind of thing. Another question, would it be a good idea to listen to what critics of my church have to say? So let's assume that they're doing their jobs properly, this Jehovah's Witness, and they're saying they're agreeing with everything that you say. You can then say, if I were to leave behind Catholicism and join Jehovah's Witnesses, would I be allowed to do those things? And at this point, I'm guessing the Jehovah's Witness would pause and wouldn't have an immediate response, because you've just teed up a scenario where the Jehovah's Witness has admitted, or they will most likely admit or verify, that you should be questioning your beliefs. But this applies to all religions but theirs. Theirs is the only religion where you're not allowed to question things. You're not allowed to subject your beliefs to scrutiny. You're not allowed to listen to critics, all of that sort of thing. So that's kind of one line of dialogue that it might be worth trying or exploring, again intended at sowing seeds. Another suggestion on a different tack. Okay, this was an interesting conversation after you've had some kind of introductory conversation, but I'm in a bit of a hurry, so I need to go. However, I must say I'm intrigued by what you've told me. When I get home later, I'm going to Google Jehovah's Witnesses to learn more about your organization. And if you say that, they are going to react quite strongly and say, no, you shouldn't Google us. You should go on our website, jw.org. They are going to every which way tell you or try to steer you towards their approved website and steer you away from any kind of objective analysis or review of their religion. So then when they do that, inevitably they will do that. You can say, respectfully, advising me against Googling your faith is a red flag. Joining a religion is actually a really important decision to me. If I were trying to decide whether to buy a really expensive car, do you think I would listen only to reviews from the car manufacturer and not from independent sources and previous owners? So again, I wouldn't say it's a kind of a gotcha or a slam dunk. They are going to find something to say. They have to find something to say. And in my experience, what they tend to do when backed into a corner like that is just say anything. Just like change the subject, divert, present a non-argument, do anything to just kind of squirm out of that situation. But again, the objective is not to win any battles. The objective, even if they change the subject and try to divert things, the aim is to sow the seed. And I think by saying those things, by saying, look, it's a red flag that you're warning people against Googling your group, it's something that will hopefully lodge in their minds. Moving on to my next suggestion. Do you believe your religion is the absolute truth? This is another thing you could say. Obviously, practically everyone who is religious believes theirs to be the absolute truth. If you could sum up in just a few words the most compelling reasons why your religion is true and all others are false, how would you do that? So I call this the elevator pitch scenario. Give me your elevator pitch for why your religion is the truth. Now, what they're going to do is, it can either go one of two ways. Either they will give you the response, well, it was chosen by God as his one appointed channel in 1919. They might say that, but more likely they will steer you down what I call the box ticking exercise, which is where they say, well, ours is the only religion that ticks these boxes. So ours is the only religion that uses the name Jehovah. Ours is the only religion that preaches all over the world. Actually, it's not all over the world, but okay. Ours is the only religion that encourages people not to go to war. Again, not true. So they give you all of these boxes that have been prepared for them by their leaders and that they know they can tick. So it's kind of a rigged exercise. So after they've done this, you can say, you've mentioned a number of criteria for choosing which religion is true. Did you come up with those criteria, or did your church come up with them? And another thing you can say is, if I were to start a religion that could somehow meet those criteria, even in a limited way, would that also make my religion true? So let's say, hypothetically, I start up like a one-man religion, or let's say a family religion, where we use the name Jehovah, we don't go to war, we go away and travel and try to preach to people. Does that automatically make it God's one true religion? And then you can say, I notice you dismiss all other religions as false. Obviously, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of religions worldwide. How many of them have you studied? So you're giving us you're giving us these criteria by which your religion is true. How are you able to dismiss all of the other religions? And what studying have you done into the other religions that convinces you that they're false? So that's another suggestion. Another way of doing things is to say, as I understand it, your church teaches that we are living in the last days. Is that correct? And they're going to say yes. And you can say, why do you believe that? I think why questions, you can't go wrong with them. I think it's a really good way of navigating any kind of interaction where you're trying to drill down to motives, and it's a sincere interaction. In other words, it's not just a point-scoring exercise. You're not interested in just proving points. You're interested in what makes the person's mind work. How have they arrived at this position? And so I think in almost all of these scenarios that I'm presenting, any opportunity you get to say, why do you believe that? It's always great to insert that. And then you can say, so you genuinely believe world conditions are worse now than at any point in human history? They're, of course, going to say yes. And then you can say, if you had a choice between living now or living 100 years ago, what would you choose? It doesn't have to be 100 years. It could be 20 years, could be 200 years. The length of time isn't really relevant. The point is that everyone, if they're being honest, prefers living now than at a point in human history when things were more primitive and less advanced. So in other words, yes, humanity is complicated. There is and always has been strife and warfare and illnesses and disease, but incrementally, even if it's, one step back, two steps forward, incrementally we're going in the right direction, and life now is objectively easier than it was in the past, certainly in the distant past. And I've actually used this particular argument with Jehovah's Witnesses in the street, and they do struggle with this. So, not that we're trying to make them struggle, but again, it's something that can sow a seed. Next suggestion. From what I understand, you seem to believe that good people will live forever and bad people will soon die, correct? So the point of this line of thought is to kind of highlight the whole doomsday element and try and appeal to their humanity. So you can then say, so all I need to do to live forever is be a good person. Is that right? And this is where they're going to start squirming a little bit, because it's not enough to just be a good person for Jehovah's Witnesses. You have to be a baptized Jehovah's Witness in order to survive Armageddon. So they're going to start trying to steer you in that direction. And they're going to maybe use some quite evasive wording to try and not sound as doomsday as they actually are. But the point of these questions in this particular part of the video is to kind of get them to admit to how doomsday the religion is. Do you think it's possible for me to be a good person and not be one of Jehovah's Witnesses? That's one that I promise you they are going to struggle with. They might not show that they're struggling. They might, again, just give you like a non-answer or try to divert the conversation. But that's one that they will struggle with because, again, it's not simply about being a good person. And finally, on this particular line of argument, if the Armageddon you predict were to come 2 months from now, would you feel comfortable with me dying just because, although a good person, I'm not a member of your faith? Again, the objective is to appeal to their humanity and sow a seed. And hopefully, by this point in the conversation, because you've presented yourself in a kind, respectful way, they're going to have a really hard time justifying in their mind, oh yeah, this person deserves to die if Armageddon were to come 2 months from now. And there's certainly, if it's a polite person with basic social skills, they're certainly not going to want to say that to your face. Yeah, you deserve to die 2 months from now if you don't join our religion. So that's another angle you could take. Yet another angle is to say, do you believe that your religion is the only channel God is using to communicate his intention to humans? So again, this is kind of a yes or no deal. And of course, they're going to say yes. Interestingly, when Jeffrey Jackson was asked a similar question as part of the Australian Royal Commission, he said it would be presumptuous to suggest to say that. In this particular setting, when a Jehovah's Witness is representing their religion, they should feel some element of pride, and they should be able to say, yes, I believe that my religion is the only channel God is using. So you can then say, there had to be a point at which this communication started. When exactly do you believe God started using your religion as his channel? Now, if they know their beliefs and if they know their religion, at this point they should say 1919. 1919 was when God appointed the faithful and discreet slave, in effect, using the Jehovah's Witness organization, or what would come to be the Jehovah's Witness organization, as his channel. It could be that you're speaking to someone that frankly doesn't know the religion all that well and doesn't know the teachings all that well. Maybe it's a young person, or maybe it's just a Jehovah's Witness who's kind of just along for the ride and doesn't pay much attention to what the teachings are. And they might not say 1919, but if they know their stuff, if, say, it's an elder that you're speaking to, if they're being honest And if they are presenting themselves properly, if they are presenting the religion properly, the correct answer to that question is 1919. At which point you can say, do you have any objective evidence you can share that would persuade me that in 1919 God started communicating with humans through Jehovah's Witnesses? And of course, they're not going to have any objective evidence. That's not to say they won't have an answer. They're going to squirm around maybe a bit and come up with something to just say back at you, just kind of words to throw in your direction. But again, it doesn't really matter what they say back. The point is to sow a seed. And my final suggested angle of conversation, of dialogue, is to say, I do read the Bible occasionally. Hopefully you can say that honestly. And there is one verse I would be interested in getting your thoughts on. Can you read Deuteronomy 18, verses 20 to 22? Now, I'm not going to read that verse to you now, but I have covered it in a recent video, thumbnail here. The verse describes how you would identify a false prophet. And according to the Bible, you identify a false prophet because they prophesy something in God's name and it doesn't come true. And so you can say, after you make them read it, hopefully they will agree to read it. I mean, why wouldn't they? It's the Bible. You can say, has your religion ever predicted something to happen in God's name and it hasn't happened? Now, at this point, they could just lie. Never write off the possibility of Jehovah's Witnesses, when really pushed, just flat out lying to your face. It's happened to me. It's happened to me when I've engaged with them in the street. But in a way, again, it doesn't matter whether they lie to you. What matters is what's going on in their head, because they're going to be conscious of the fact that they're lying to you. So even if they say, oh no, all of our predictions have always come true, they're going to know that that's not true, especially if they've been around a bit, especially if they've been in the organization for a few decades, let's say. They're going to be able to readily call to mind examples of where they have predicted something and then changed their minds. Whether it's the generation teaching, whether it's 1975, anyone who knows the religion and its history will be able to think of examples of where they have changed their minds when it comes to predicting something. They could argue that they're not prophets, but again, this would be disingenuous, and it doesn't even matter when it comes to showing them that they're being disingenuous, because they're going to know deep down that they're being disingenuous if they were to raise that objection. So those are just a few things that you can say. And again, I'm aware that there are multiple ways of dealing with these scenarios, and I might make future videos about this where I give more suggestions. In fact, let's make this a community project. If you're watching this, feel free to share your own suggestions and your own recommendations. The only thing I would again stress is, let's make this respectful. Let's not make this combative. Let's not make this a situation where we're mocking and belittling people. These are people who are not in control of their own minds. And they are being forced to do a token preaching work just to show their loyalty to this organization that has them in its thrall. So why would we mock or belittle someone who is already a victim and who is already being used and exploited? Why don't we instead try to help them? And again, you're never, I would suggest, never going to just make them, collapse their literature cart and say, you know what, you're right, I'm done with this. I'm dropping off this cart at the Kingdom Hall and I'm never doing this again. That, it would be lovely, but that's realistically not going to happen. But what we can aspire to, and perhaps should aspire to, if we're feeling up to it, is to make them think, to just say something that will register in their mind so that they can think back to our conversation and think, that person was kind to me and they were nice and they said something that really stuck with me. What was it? What was it that they said? You know, hopefully that will be what will happen. And it might be that they don't end up exiting ever, or if they do exit, it might not be until years in the future. But who knows, maybe that conversation that you have might prove to be a stepping stone towards that. That would be nice, wouldn't it? So leave your suggestions in the comments if you have any further suggested angles or lines of conversation that you can think of. And I must thank my patrons for voting for this particular video. Fantastic subject. My patrons and YouTube channel members always come good when it comes to giving me some really interesting subjects to cover on the channel. So I hope you found this video informative. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for similar videos. And as always, thank you for watching.